Hello and welcome. Welcome to the NorthStar Café. And my name is Meenakshi Iyer. I'm your host and the founder of NorthStar Solutions and Services, a boutique future of work oriented virtual coaching, training, and consulting practice. And we specialize in partnering with mid career technology leaders, women in tech, and those of us that speak English as an additional language. We specialize in partnering with them to help them become impactful people and change leaders. I myself am a personal agility, self leadership, and change leadership coach. And the NorthStar Cafe is a space that I've created to have action oriented conversations on leadership development at the intersection of people, process, and technology. And here's where I get to hang out with guests from around the world every other week and talk about various concepts and practices when it comes to individual and team leadership. And today's topic is community-supported leadership development. What the heck is that? Well, for starters, I just made that up, and it's not a term that you'll find in any literature, but it is something that a dear friend and fellow coach of mine has really built from scratch, and I thought we needed to talk about that. So, with that, I'd love to welcome Katherine Spinney. Thank you for joining us, Katherine.
Thanks for having me, Meenakshi. It's such a joy to be with you here today in a different capacity. We've done a few of these in different iterations. And you said how cool it is to get to hang out with folks every other week. I do want to point out you've created the spaces like this for people to connect and to share with folks out there as well about the work we're doing together, the stuff we're trying to figure out together, and it doesn't come without a lot of effort. So I did want to highlight that it didn't magically happen. You create these spaces and they're so valuable.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Katherine. And, I really appreciate what you shared. And I also appreciate our partnership and friendship over the years. And I know we were introduced by Mindy Mosier, who I met through the Coach Arya community. And it's 3 years, a little over 3 years now. And when we first met, I think I was about 6 months into starting NorthStar Solutions and Services, and I was figuring my way out, and I was new into coaching, and so I've learned a lot just from watching you and how you've navigated this path as a coach, and I know you wear several hats. So I'd like to share with everyone how Katherine and I met. So we have not yet met in person. Shocking.
Shocking. I was almost going to correct you on that. And I'm like, that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel that way.
That is true. That is true. And Katherine Spinney has been serves as a leadership coach, and she's a speaker, and she's an inventor. I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about all that. And Katherine specifically focuses on first-time leaders and supervisors in particular. And one of her creations is the Supervisor Circle, and which is what gave me the idea for today's conversation, the topic for today's conversation. So Katherine has done this for more than 20 years. And I know, Katherine, you've also had sort of like a portfolio career, if you will, that included an overseas stint where you taught English to speakers of other languages. And you've been in this people development space for a long time. And you started your own practice. Oh, gosh, yes, 6 years ago. Yesterday was your birthday for Katherine Spinney Coaching. Mm-hmm. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How does that feel 6 years in as a solopreneur?
Yeah, it's like a lot of things. I think some days it feels like 100 years ago, and some days it feels like yesterday, and sometimes both of those things all in the same day. But I think one of the things that it has really taught me, and I try to share with my clients and my students and folks I work with, is it's really easy to not forget, but not take a moment to, the metaphor that gets used a lot is look back down the mountain. People who are so driven to get to the top of that mountain often focus only on that part. And that focus is really important. And so too, is those moments when you need to look back down the mountain to say, wow, these things I now take for granted were really, really hard in the beginning. And so the things that still lay ahead that look really, really hard, it's a good reminder to say, I figured those things out too. So even though this is going to be a new something that's ahead, I can have confidence in myself that I can overcome whatever is ahead and keep on moving. But that moment to say, yes, we have this far to go, and my dreams and my goals are still ahead, and look how far we've come.
Yeah, that is absolutely well said. And there's so much to learn in pausing for reflection, right? It also, not only does it give us joy, but also the strength and the energy to move forward. Very well said. Thank you for sharing that. And I also would love to, I want to welcome everyone that's watching us live. We are currently live on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And the replay will be available on all these channels automatically. I would also invite you, Katherine, to share a little bit more about how you got into this, what started Katherine Spinney Coaching, and a little bit about your background.
So I started my career in the classroom. I'm still in the classroom, which is a great joy of mine, part-time now, but it's something I hope to always be a part of. I love teaching. I was raised by teachers. I'm an educator at heart. And when I was a teacher, even though I had a department head and even though I had a principal, it largely felt like I was on my own. It was my own classroom. It didn't feel like that traditional supervisory relationship. So years in the classroom, as you mentioned, I was overseas. I had the great joy and privilege of living and teaching in South Korea for almost 4 years and coming back. And I went back to school to get my master's in social work. And it wasn't until I was well into my career that I had what was considered a traditional supervisor, while simultaneously becoming a supervisor myself for the first time. And when I was hired for that first position out of grad school that included being a supervisor, it was treated as sort of secondary, incidental. I was running a community center as an educator and a social worker that was bustling. There were programs and things going on from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And there was a lot to do. And it was a little bit like, oh, and by the way, you'll also have this staff. And that's how I embraced it. Like, okay, I guess I'll also have this staff. And so I started that position. I had no training, no background in supervising, which unfortunately is the case for the majority of folks stepping into management. And I didn't know what to do. So I didn't really do anything. I did my job, or what I thought to be my job. My staff did their job, I learned later, with no direction from me. And as these things do, it didn't work. It didn't work well. I realized that it wasn't working. And after some really unpleasant beginnings to this world of management over a decade ago, even in that moment, I said, there's got to be a better way to do this, because this is really hard. And I'm understanding now, as I'm going through it, being a supervisor is the most important part of the work I'm doing. It's not these programs, it's not these things. Ultimately it is, but being able to lead my team to do the work and to meet our mission, I have to learn how to become a supervisor. And I did it like the spaghetti on the wall. I took up books in the library. I tried to find trainings on my own. I took fellow supervisors out for coffee and drinks and dinners and said, how do you do this thing? And ever since then, I've said there's got to be an easier, more efficient, more effective way to welcome folks into management for their own growth and learning, and ultimately for the growth and learning of their teams.
Absolutely. And as you shared that, I can see how you really sort of crowdsourced the support and the the knowledge and the wisdom, right, to figure out your own way. And you're absolutely right. That's been my experience as well, my own experience, and also in the work that I do with my clients. Technology, the world of technology, like most other industries, career growth, or more often than not, means a vertical movement, and then more often than not, it involves leading people.
Mm-hmm.
And there is not much education around that. I mean, I don't know if that's even a thing in a focus in schools and colleges, for instance. So there is no, you don't go to school for that. Maybe your MBA is considered that, but even there, it's not a lot of focus on the intricacies and the nuances of what it takes to lead people.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing shifts, right? As an individual contributor, you're only focused on your own success and the quality of the work that you do. But then once you shift into leading people, your success is their success. So you've got to really work completely differently. And there's not much support within organizations. That's what I got into what I do, focusing on the mid-career segment. And this was also something I saw a lot of parallels and intersections with the work that you do, mm-hmm. albeit, maybe in a different sector, but the focus is the same. So speaking of this, can you talk to us a little bit more about what does leadership development really mean to you? And the part 2 of that question is, how do you see coaching play a role in that?
So I'll start by saying that there's no shortage of discussion, articles, memes out there, that the sort of leader versus manager. What's the difference between leaders and managers? And it's certainly possible to be a leader in your job, in your space, without managing other people. I think we can all concede that. But I don't like to spend a lot of time on this distinction between leaders and managers, because there is so much overlap too, right? So even though you can be a leader without managing other people, to be a really successful manager of other people, you need to know how to lead. You can't separate those two. So I think that intersection of the Venn diagram is a lot bigger than sometimes we try to make it. And so whether we're talking about leadership that involves supervising other people or not, my work tends to focus on the supervising and the managing of other folks. Mm-hmm. A couple of things that hold true, leading a staff or otherwise, is the concept that development, like in everything we do, needs to be ongoing. And the leaders and managers who do have what shouldn't be considered a luxury, but most people don't get, training and support, they tend to get it at the beginning of that journey. So and it's actually a really interesting contrast, because they either get it at the very beginning, or once they hit that C-suite, all of a sudden, as part of their compensation package, they have an executive coach, right? And we have all this time in the middle, which is where most of our management lies, where there is no support, if there even was that initial support in the beginning. Okay. So it's often treated, if there is support again at all, here's how you do it, and now we're done. So yes. Go ahead, go forth and lead, so to speak. And so the concept of development being ongoing, I think, is really central to this. Is you don't take the leadership 101, the leadership cohort, whatever the version of leadership training you get, and now you know how to be a leader forevermore. And the second piece to it that's really been on my mind a lot this year, people talk about having like a theme or a word for the year. Mine might be, arguably, leadership potential. We use that term a lot, and like any term we use a lot, I start to wonder, are we meaning the same thing when we use this term? Because it's really nebulous, right? What does it mean to have leadership potential? And I think part of what has caused a lot of the damage in how we support or don't support our leaders is this perception of who has leadership potential. And I think part of the reason we don't invest more in training our leaders and our managers is this myth that persists of leaders are born and not made, right? So if you're either a leader or you're not, then why invest in teaching someone something that they're not born with? Maybe is how that thinking goes.
Yeah.
And identifying who has that it,
Yes.
who was born with it, is traditionally has been a very stereotypical view of the charismatic, the outgoing, the extroverted. I often have that early image of a man in a three-piece suit sort of leader. So as long as those perceptions persist, then the way we approach leadership development persists. So we need to challenge the perception in order to then implement these systems where we say, leadership potential, there's lots of ways to lead. There's lots of positions that involve leadership. And sometimes those folks are really quiet. Sometimes they are really extroverted and charismatic. But opening the doors to folks for these leadership development opportunities, instead of designating somewhat arbitrarily or with our own stereotypes or biases, you have leadership potential, so you get the support or the position, but you don't.
Yeah. Oh my God, you said a lot there, and so much of it resonates with me, and it's a bit of a soapbox for me as well. And the one thing that you called out, like development work has to be ongoing, and that reminded me of this often circulated TED talk by Dr. Atul Gawande, where he says everybody needs a coach. If you want to get better at something, get a coach. That's the title of the talk. And he's a well-known surgeon, and he talks about his own experience of how he had one of his mentors come back into his operating room, and he talks about his experience there. And he was actually very pleasantly surprised at how much he learned from the mentor after all these years. And that was the focus of the talk. And that's the whole point. And the other thing that came up for me as you were sharing your views, Katherine, is also sports, right? In sports, we expect the team to have a coach, right? But somehow it remains there. And just because a team won whatever the championship trophy is, doesn't mean that we don't suddenly expect the coach to go away, right? So if that's true for sports, how come we don't, how might we bring that perception or that point of view to how we lead people or become leaders? And the other thing that you said about, you get a lot of support at the beginning and then probably towards the later part of your career and nothing in between. And that's where most of your work happens, and the impact that you create on others, on yourself and people and the organization. So I'm so glad you called that out. So this actually is a perfect segue. I want you to talk to us about, I know you got a trademarked, and then you have created, so you've created two things, if you will, one a framework and the other is the community. So would you mind sharing a little bit more about the Lead with Your Mind and the Supervisor Circle?
Yes, thank you. I always love to talk about this. So the Lead with the Mind came out of this work, which was very often when we talk about leadership, becoming a leader, and leadership development and training, we talk about skills, leadership skills. What skills do you need to be a leader? And those skills are really important. So leaders or not, I argue a lot of the skills we designate as leadership skills are skills that everybody benefits from. It's a lot of things like problem solving, decision making, communication skills, delegating, praise, feedback, coaching, all these things that everybody could benefit from. But as I continued to study and learn and my own experiences, I realized that it's not just skills, and it can't be just skills, because it's not the type of work that works that way, right? So we're not plugging things into a formula. We're not following these steps that should work every time we do them. Because at the heart of the work, you're working with people, and every person you ever lead or supervise comes into that team with their own backgrounds, beliefs, values, communication styles, goals, strengths, weaknesses, working styles, all this stuff they bring in. So you can't learn a skill, for example, of how to communicate as a leader, because the way you communicate with one staff isn't going to be as effective as the way you communicate with another staff, or the way that you, the goals that they have, or what you're working on with them for them to develop, because everyone's walking in with their own strengths already. So this concept of figuring it out and then dispensing it to your team, it doesn't work that way. So in addition to the skill, there are some baseline things to learn about what makes communication effective or not, what makes running a meeting effective or not. But it can't just be the skills, because the skills, the position necessitates that those skills are flexible and adjustable. And so what else is part of this equation? What else, in addition to skills, do people need to be successful? So there was a lot of playing around. I had images of puzzle pieces and all kinds of letters to make a really cool acronym. And Lead With Your Mind took about 2 years to finally put it together. But the acronym of MIND was ultimately what the research says, what my experience has been, was in addition to those skills, having the leadership mindset for the M is essential. We know mindset as at the center of all things. The I is the investment into your development, which is what we were just talking about. You can't just do the training once and be done. It's a lifelong commitment to investing in the growth of your own self in addition to your staff. The N, I couldn't figure out the S. So the N is the necessary skills. And the D, I always say, I wish I could have figured out an acronym where the D was at the beginning, because it really is the most important, which is the desire. You can be good at things you don't particularly enjoy, but it's really hard to be great at them. And what the research shows, particularly leadership positions that involve management, are not desirable to most folks. And the research that the Harvard Business Review did was, in fact, less than 40% of people have any desire to be managers. They don't want to do it. But as you pointed out, if they want to move up, if they want more money, more responsibility, it's often the collateral damage along the way. So when we're examining that leadership potential, however we've defined that, my suggestion always is not being enamored by the high performer all the time, but starting with the desire. So who amongst your team has any interest in being a leader, has any interest in, because it might not be your best frontline worker, which is often who does get promoted into management positions. It might be someone who does perfectly fine at their job, but really shines as a manager. And so really starting with that desire, who has interest in this? And then those skills can, almost all of them, be learned and developed over time.
That is so well said. And I love the acronym, and I do agree with you. It starts with desire. And you know, that brings up a good point. Something you had talked about just a few minutes ago, about when you talked about leadership potential. I have always found this concept of training or providing leadership development support for high potential leaders, hypo, right? I've struggled with that quite a bit, because I think, and I figured it out, for me, inclusion is one of my core values. And using this framework makes it sort of elitist, makes it sort of, oh, you need to do something in order to get there. And you're not there yet. And, it makes me very uncomfortable. And I think that you make a great point is if we just use potential, first of all, somebody else is measuring that, right? And if we discount the individual's desire to be in that role, then who are we really serving by doing this? And then we invest all this money and time and energy into providing all this training. And I also wanted to go back to something you had said earlier around when you do talk about potential and if it's somebody else judging it, the stereotypes that we have in our own minds and what leadership looks like, plus our own biases on who we choose not to invest in, right? So there are so many risks there as you think about it from an organizational standpoint. So to me, against this backdrop, what you're trying to do with your framework of lead with your mind and also the supervisor circle that you've just sort of launched a few months ago, it's very exciting. So I'd love for you to share a little bit more about the supervisor circle, like what was the genesis and what was the vision? What is your vision for the community?
It's the perfect word to use, Meenakshi, is vision. And folks who are familiar with the nonprofit space, nonprofits have a mission statement, which is what their nonprofit is set up to accomplish. And most nonprofits also have a vision statement, which is a little bit more ambitious, a little bigger, to say, what's our greater vision for the work outside even of this organization? So, for example, I come from the youth development space, and our mission of organizations might be to have students prepared for a career or college after high school or something to that effect. But our vision statement might be that all children are equipped for a healthy, successful life, for example. So it's bigger, and it's not necessarily in that SMART format we've all been taught to make our goals in. So when I had my 5th anniversary a year ago yesterday of the business itself, it was a great natural moment to say, this is a milestone. I did look back down that mountain at how far we've come. And also to say, what now? What does the future of this work look like? And I knew from the beginning, my mission statement, the mission statement of the business, was to support new and aspiring managers to better support their teams. That remains my mission. But it was a nice moment to say, what's my vision? If I had this big, lofty vision statement, what is it? And my answer was, I want all first-time and current managers to have something accessible and valuable that they can reach to support them in their growth and development. And the work I was doing until then was me coming into a space, either doing trainings, doing coachings, doing retreats, doing leadership series, whatever the case may be. But there was a limited capacity. It was live and it took a lot of time. And frankly, it's an investment on the part of the organizations bringing me in. So the vision became, what would it look like if everybody had, the day they get promoted, you're a manager, go here. Here's how we get you started. Not how we finish, but here's how we get you started. So what would that look like? And I went through all this brainstorming. I worked with coaches of my own and friends. And what is this? Is it a curriculum? Is it a course? Is it a this? Is it a that? So after lots and lots of thinking and planning, the vision became this new virtual platform, which is the Supervisors Circle. And the vision behind the Supervisors Circle is, what do managers need to be successful? And taking that mindset, that lead with your mind, all those pieces, that's what we've built, and we continue to grow and build it, because it includes the skills stuff. There's videos, there's downloadable resources, all those things when you're a new manager where you say, oh, I'm interviewing someone for the first time. What questions should I ask? You can find interview questions. Or I'm putting someone on a performance plan. What document should I use? Or I'm firing someone for the first time, or I need to give critical feedback. These really hard things. There's videos, there's documents, there's templates, all that good stuff. And the greater vision of it is, as we said from the beginning, it's not just the skills, and it's not, okay, I watched the video, now I know how to do it. What happens with leaders and managers is you go to the training, watch the video, what have you. Then you put that thing into practice. And then you need a space to say, ooh, it didn't go so well. So what went wrong? Or it went really well with this staff, and then it really didn't go well with this staff. So what's the difference? Why? So there needs, and I have this slide I use in almost all of my trainings. It's just this cycle that says training, implementation, coaching, self-reflection, training, implementation, coaching, self-reflection. And the coaching, self-reflection piece is almost always the one that's omitted. To say, okay, I ran a meeting for the first time. I gave feedback for the first time. I hired someone for the first time. What worked? What didn't work? What are my lessons learned? So in the supervisor circle, we have a forum, which is an opportunity for folks to, post questions and answers and share resources. And we also do lots of live things. We do live coachings. We do what's called troubleshooting sessions, where people can come on and say, here's an issue I'm struggling with. What does the community think? And very rarely is it the one right Googleable answer. That's why there's a community there for you to say, oh yeah, I experienced that too. Here's what worked for me, which may or may not work for you, right? And finally, I shouldn't say my favorite, because I love all the sections, but one of my favorite sections, we have what's called the words of wisdom. And these are words from supervisors like you and me, supervisors who've been at it for a year, 3 years, 20 years, to say, here's my experience, here's my story, here's my encouragement. And so it's all those pieces together to say, one, let's normalize that this is hard.
Yep.
And two, let's figure it out together. And sometimes we'll get it, quote unquote, right. And sometimes we won't, because that's what leadership is. Yes. And that's what leading other people is. Sometimes with the best preparation and intention, what we're trying to do doesn't work so well. So but we need that space to go to say, now what? Help me. I don't know where to go from here.
This is so novel and so innovative and well put together. And I have to say that I wish I had something like this when I first started. I did have a very hard time being a first-time supervisor, especially in the US, all the cultural differences and all of that thrown in as well. And in fact, after my first experience, I cleaned up my resume and I said, I never, ever want to be a supervisor here. And I said, I'll just focus on individual contributor roles. And that's what I did for a big part of my career. And the other thing I also loved in what you shared with the supervisor circle, you're hitting on all key points, right? One, the accessibility part of it. And what also struck me is the different learning styles, because you have videos, you have stuff that people can read. And then you have the group component as well, and there's choice in how members want to engage in this. And go ahead.
Well, yes, and I was going to say, one of the things I struggle with as a supervisor, and now in the work that I do, my default is what works for me, right? I think we're all guilty of that in different shades. And so I have to remind myself, since I started this business, I've written a weekly blog. I still do it. And, it's 200 plus posts later. It's still going strong. But I've had people over the years say, you really need to do video. People want to see videos. And I said, much to the chagrin of folks who were trying to help me, I don't want to do it. And so I'm going to keep writing this blog because I like to write and I don't like to watch a lot of videos. I like to read. I like to read people's blogs. When I'm scrolling through social media, I don't stop at the videos. I stop at the articles. Now that might put me in the minority, which I need to recognize. So that's where the design came in, that even though my go-to might not be the videos, they're there because it is the go-to for a lot of folks. There's also transcripts that people can download of each video. So if they don't want to watch the video, the transcripts are there. But I appreciate you saying that because, again, with a lot of good intention, and this is only what can come with experience, this is what a lot of leaders and supervisors do, not because they're choosing not to try other things. They just don't necessarily know to do that.
Yeah.
So that moment when you've done what you know, I like to reference a lot the platinum rule that I only learned a couple of years ago. I'd never heard it before, which the golden rule that gets shared a lot, do unto others as you want them to do unto you. And somebody pointed out to me this concept of the platinum rule, which is do unto others as they want you to do unto them. And that was a really big turning point for me to say, am I doing it this way because it works for me? And I'm not taking into consideration what might work for other people. So even though I really like to write blog posts and I want to do writing and not video, am I neglecting some of the needs and preferences from folks because I'm being stubborn or because I'm only seeing it my way? So that's an ongoing lesson that I continue to learn.
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge and applaud your courage and vulnerability and your self-awareness, in seeing all of that and then in calling it out, and that too on a public forum. I do want to acknowledge and appreciate that. And I know we've had some conversations about doing stuff virtually and otherwise, and I'm the other extreme. Like, I have lived only in the virtual world primarily, and my business has been intentionally virtual. And so I totally understand. But, in all this, while you have tried to address something that you see for yourself, what you've also created in this, Katherine, is a very inclusive space. Because if you look at involving everyone with different physical abilities, having stuff to read, having stuff to watch, or maybe I'm in a space where I may not be able to turn the video on, but I want to watch the video, but I may not be able to have the audio on, then I'm actually, following along with the transcript. So you've made it accessible at all levels, and I really appreciate that aspect of it. And for me, it was also a matter of pride and pleasure when you asked folks like myself to contribute. And I had so much fun doing that video. And I will say I'll do a video any day than write.
Isn't that funny?
Yes. But I've also learned that in order for me to make a good video, I have to write because I have to have a script so that, it's concise and it's to the point. So it's interesting. I actually just thought about it. I actually have to write. So I might as well just write. Anyway, but I had a lot of fun putting that together. And then you so generously offered a few days for me to go and look at the site. And I loved what I saw, the space and how everything is organized. So I would encourage everyone to go take a look. And here's the URL again, thesupervisorcircle.com. And of course, connect with Katherine and follow her on LinkedIn. And I know you also have a Facebook group, right, Katherine?
Not a group. So okay. I am on Facebook as a business page. I don't have a group, but I do want to say part of that accessibility is also the price point. So yes. I wanted to, so when I started out this whole journey, I wanted the vision goal, however we want to call it, is I don't ever want someone to pay out of pocket for their professional growth that benefits their companies. And so my model has always been to support the individuals in an organization while having the organizations pay for it. Now, some organizations are more able to do that. Some are more willing to do that. And I appreciate that with certain organizations, they're not going to pay for me to come in and do one-on-one coaching or to do training for their staffs. So my part of trying to put this vision into reality was, how do I reach organizations like that? Organizations whose new and current managers really need some additional support, but the organizations aren't willing to invest that time and money. So part of what I have been working with in the design of the platform is still the organizations should be paying for it. And if folks are working for organizations who won't invest in them while they're looking for other jobs, in the meantime, the way it's priced right now is it's $19 a month, so that if folks can invest maybe in the meantime until they find a company who will be willing to invest. But to make it really affordable, make it really accessible, obviously it's all virtual, so they can access it all day and night. And in celebration of the 6th birthday of my company, I am giving out free passes, if you will, to the Supervisors Circle. And in that spirit of 6, it's a 6-day free pass. So folks can go in, they can download things, they can look around. There are some live events on the calendar coming up that they can participate in. They can post and answer and ask in the forum to really get a feel for what the site is all about. So I'm very happy to share that with folks as well.
That's wonderful. And thank you for sharing that as well. And then, yes, the birthday giveaway. That's wonderful. I remember seeing that on LinkedIn yesterday. So thank you for sharing that. And so what's the best way for folks to take advantage of that? How do they go about doing that?
Yeah, so I do have a link to it. So I wonder, Meenakshi, after this is posted, if I put it in the event session, does that work? Okay, I can do that. People can also email me if you go to Supervisor Circle to check it out, and I hope you do. There's a contact form, so if you send me an email that way and say, where's the code, I'd be happy to send that to you as well. It's not a discount code, it's a link, so I can't share that out loud. I'm not being withholding. I just, it's a whole long URL, so I can't share it that way, but very happy to share it with anybody who's interested in. And again, the goal is to say, let's not wait till folks are in the C-suite before they ever get any leadership or management training. It's so backwards to me. Like, let's wait till the end of someone's career before we support them in this very important role. So the vision is, if you're the decision maker at your organization, if you are a manager who's been looking for support, to start to say, we need to have something that's easily accessible. And I'll give one more example, Meenakshi, if I can, because this happens a lot. One of the contracts I have, which is wonderful, it's an organization who's really committed to investing in their leadership. And every time they have new managers come in, they call me up and say, can you come in and do this pretty intense work with them? But what happens a lot of times with this organization is true of lots of organizations, which is, okay, this new manager comes in September, let's do it then. And then September rolls around, well, we have another new manager starting in November, so let's wait and do it together. And then it's the holidays, and then it's the gala season, and then it's this, and then it's that, and then it's this. So in the meantime, we get there eventually, but in the meantime, this person's been in this position for months, if not years in some cases, before ever getting that support. And so that support is still really valuable, and organizations should still invest in live coaching and training. And having that immediate, let's get started here. Let's start figuring out what you need to be working on, some things you haven't thought about yet. Bring it to our one-on-one meetings. We can talk about it. So it takes some of the pressure off the organizations too. And they just need to provide that access to say, okay, you're a manager, here's how we're going to get started.
Absolutely. And then that is, you're hitting on the gap that exists, and that's so true, right? And I love what you said, why wait till the end? That's exactly what it is. And then we call it a pipeline problem, right?
Yes.
And that term is used in many contexts, but this is one of it. And I want to again, thank and welcome everyone that's just joined us. If you've just joined us, we're in the NorthStar Café talking to Katherine Spinney, founder of Katherine Spinney Coaching, and also the creator of Lead with Your Mind and the Supervisors Circle. And the whole idea of the Supervisors Circle is what inspired me to coin this term, if you will, community-supported leadership development, because that's exactly what you're doing. You're crowdsourcing wisdom, and you've put together such wonderful content, easily accessible, and it's self-paced, in different formats, and with the additional support of cohort or group-based learning as and when needed. What else, as we begin to wrap up this conversation, Katherine, what would you like to say to all the first-time people leaders and supervisors out there?
Supervising is really hard, and it takes time to do it well. Most folks who become managers, whether they were promoted into it or they're hired as a manager for the first time, are chosen because of their success. And as you pointed out, Meenakshi, such a salient point, they were chosen in most cases because they're really good in the individual work they've been doing. And that shift, it's really a 180 to have spent your entire academic career, your entire professional career focusing on shining as an individual, particularly in the United States, right? And now all of a sudden, because of that work, you're asked to do a complete 180 and stop focusing on yourself and start focusing on your team. And if you're anything like me, I didn't even know to expect that much. So even having someone sit down and say, "Whew, it's going to be different. Here's what, and let's start to prepare you and continue to support you throughout this pretty major shift in how you operate as a professional." So being able to say it doesn't come naturally to people, that it's not just a skill set, it's a very complex combination of lots of complex skills. In addition to understanding that mindset, what does it mean to be a leader? How do I perceive my role? How do I perceive the role of my team? What does it mean to be a servant leader? What does it mean to have input with my team, to get people bought in? So all these really complex things, it takes a lot of time to really get comfortable in what it means to lead well. And so it's not a warning, but it's an honesty to say you can do this well, provided you want to learn how to do it well, provided that you want to invest the time and energy in doing it well, and allowing yourself this really, for many of us, awkward, uncomfortable, maybe the first time you haven't been super successful at something, and working through that time to get to a place where you're really effective. But for almost all of us, you have to work through a lot of moments of not being effective. And one thing I want to add to that is, in a lot of skills, and I compare it sometimes to learning a language or playing an instrument, you can practice by yourself in the comfort of your home and get really good at it before you publicly say, okay, now I'm speaking, now I'm playing this instrument. One of the biggest challenges with leadership and with managing people is almost every hard skill, there's no way to practice it. The first time you do it, you're doing it live with a real person in front of you. And that's not true of many skills. For, cooking a dinner or anything, you can practice before other folks see it. And with managing, you can't run a meeting until you run a meeting. You can't give feedback to someone by yourself or sitting in front of a mirror. The first time you do it, there's a real person on the receiving end of it. And that's really hard, and just the way that it is. So knowing to expect that and to seek that support, so that working through those hard moments, actually, you're not alone. For a lot of folks, the first time they become a manager, because they don't have that support, say, this is not for me.
Mm.
And that may be true, it's not for you. Or it could be true, you're going to be so effective at this when you have the right support.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So well said, so well pointed out. And, what I'm taking away personally from this, Katherine, is the power of community supported leadership development, right? It may seem like you're alone in this, but you're not. Seeking out. And then, yes, it is a risk in seeking out for support as well. There's a lot of courage that's required because you don't know what the response might be, and you don't know how that might be looked at, how that might be perceived. But I think there's at least two of us here telling you from experience that seeking support, asking for help in being the leader that you want to see and you want to be is actually coming from a position of strength and not otherwise. And we are here to tell you that. We're here to encourage you to do that. And as you were speaking, what came up for me is this book by John C. Maxwell. It's called Leader Shift. And there are like 10 different maxims in that. And the opening is, if you want to be an effective leader, you must lead a shift. If you're interested, just Google this John Maxwell's book, Leader Shift, and it's a fantastic read, and it's very pertinent, particularly to our conversation here today. In the last thing I did want to say is that there is so much that goes into being a leader, whether you have a team reports to you or not, in even how you do your work. And leadership is completely delinked from positional power, right? And we think that, but there's the aspect of personal power that you can bring into how you show up as a leader. And I loved what you said about, it's not like you're practicing a skill like playing an instrument, you're doing it live, and you have to have the openness, the open-mindedness, and also the courage to just be accepting of what happens when you do it, right? And be open to that experience, and you're going to be better the next time, and looking at that. So this was wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, Katherine. And any parting words before we call it a wrap?
A huge gift of gratitude to you, Meenakshi, because not only do you create these spaces for folks who've joined and are listening and can learn a lot from the speakers that you bring in, but you're also creating spaces for folks like me who are on their own or running businesses or consultancies or coaches or trainers or different capacities, to give them the space to share their vision and their message with folks who can benefit. So in that spirit, you're not calling yours the Supervisor Circle, but it is, I think, a very similar type of foundation and philosophy to it, which is there's people out there who need support. Well, let me back up. Everybody needs support. So being able to connect the people who need a particular type of support with the folks who can provide that particular type of support is such a gift. So I want to thank you for creating so many amazing spaces that you do. And also to everyone who joined today, thank you for being a part of this. And that's part of the investment in yourselves and your staffs and your organizations. So really would love to extend a lot of gratitude for the time today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Katherine. And as you said that, I was reminded, how could I wrap up today without mentioning the conference? So,
oh yes, please.
No, the thing is, that's one of our first thing. I think that was our first collaboration engagement that we did back in 2020, May of 2020. And for me, it's an absolute pleasure to have someone that has seen me since the beginning, this part of my life and career. So it's absolutely wonderful. The conference that I'm referring to is NorthStar's 4th annual Future of Work conference. And for the last 3 years, we've had the pleasure and privilege of co-hosting it with a fellow solopreneur and like-minded business, Sefer LLC, and the founder and CEO is Tiffany Castano, and she and I have become great friends in the process. So it's coming up in conjunction with International Women's Day, and we are intentionally hosting the conference exactly a week after International Women's Day. This is our way of saying that these conversations need to happen on more than one day. And so the title for this year's conference, the focus is burnout, and the title is Burnout, the Silent Pandemic, Creating Sustainable Recovery for by Embracing Equity. So the whole idea for us is to focus on burnout, which all of us, most of us, if not all of us, are experiencing in one way, shape, or form. And this is a half-a-day event, a virtual event, so you can join us from wherever you are. And sign up information and all of that is available on my website. It'll also be added to the show notes here. And what's special here is that Katherine was one of our speakers when I first started this. And I've said this on many occasions before. I didn't know what shape that would take. And I was, I think, a little bit scared to call it a conference. So I called it a webinar series. But that was like the biggest virtual event that I've ever hosted. It was 5 full days when I hosted it in 2020. And it was totally international, and we had a whole bunch of fun. It was, and there you had shared about Lead with Your Mind. You had shared about the concept, the framework for leadership. And that's how we started. And so it feels like full circle with having you here today and talking about the conference coming up on its 4th year. So this has been absolutely wonderful. Once again, thank you so much for your time and wish you the best.
Thank you. Likewise.
Absolutely. And for those of you that are still here, thank you for your time, and do catch the replay if you can. And you know where to find us. Both of us are on LinkedIn, and I'd love for you to join the Supervisor Circle as well. So give it a look, and you know where to find Katherine for further information. So once again, thank you so much, everyone. Take care and have a wonderful rest of your day, and be well. Bye for now.